Hello, welcome to Pax Seneca, and this is our evening chat. And I just sat down and I looked at X, and I saw there is a development in the Abrego Garcia, I believe that's the gentleman's name, the Maryland man who was sent to El Salvador, deported without due process. And it is the story that now has the nation, activated, motivated, awake, alert, and ready to. Now we know it's pretty bad. The homegrowns are next, and who are the homegrowns? The homegrowns are pretty much anyone who doesn't agree with the administration. So we've all seen this movie. We've seen it for the last. It's the story that the founding fathers were motivated by, the tyrannical king, the reason why we don't want that. For me, when I was living in the wilderness, I was in the mountains, I was in an area where the sheriff only arrived if there was a murder. If there was a body, the police showed up. Otherwise, there was really no services. So you're out, you're 30 miles from the nearest anywhere. You're rugged mountains, you're isolated, right? And so you start to think, gee, I'm not really safe, am I? What's the difference between wilderness or the frontier and civilization? And right, it turns out that civilization is cool because it has things like law and due process. So there's a lot of issues that come along with bureaucracies and elite and society and all of that. And I was jaded by much of those. I see the problems. I'm a critic. I'm a cynic, and I see the issues. And that leads me to sometimes overreact. But this is one of those cases now where it's not an overreaction, and actually the reaction people are having is really appropriate, or maybe even not big enough of a reaction. The frontier isn't a good place. We don't want lynchings. We don't want people whisked away in the dark. We don't want people not even whisked away in the dark. In this administration, they're whisked away in broad daylight by thugs in vans, unidentified. They refuse to identify themselves. They wear masks. No foundation for a society. So in just a moment, I'm going to read the first 3 pages of this order. I think the way this is worded and the way people will see it is that it represents what a lot of us, were we sophisticated enough to say this, it's what we would say. And a lot of Americans are going to stand by this document. It's going to be a powerful document, and each time we read it, we're giving power to that document. So I'm going to lend my voice to this and give it whatever power I've got. However little that amount is, it might just be what was needed. Wilkinson, circuit judge, with whom King and Thacker, circuit judges, join. Upon review of the government's motion, the court denies the motion for an emergency stay pending appeal and for a writ of memandus. The relief the government is requesting is both extraordinary and premature. While we fully respect the executive's robust assertion of its Article 2 powers, we shall not micromanage the efforts of a fine district judge attempting to implement the Supreme Court's recent decision. It is difficult in some cases to get to the very heart of the matter, but in this case it is not hard at all. The government is asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order. Further, it claims in essence that because it has rid itself of custody, that there is nothing that can be done. This should be shocking not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear. The government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident of its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. Moreover, the government has conceded that Abreu Garcia was wrongly or mistakenly deported. Why then should it not make what was wrong right? The Supreme Court's decision remains, as always, our guidepost. That decision rightly requires that the lower federal courts give due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. That would allow sensitive diplomatic negotiations to be removed from public view. It would recognize as well that the facilitation of Abreu Garcia's return leaves the executive branch with options in the execution to which the courts, in accordance with the Supreme Court's decision, should extend a genuine deference. That decision struck a balance that does not permit the lower courts to leave Article 2 by the wayside. The Supreme Court's decision does not, however, allow the government to do essentially nothing. It requires the government to facilitate Abreu Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador, and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been handled had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. Facilitate is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken, as the Supreme Court has made perfectly clear. The plain and active meaning of the word cannot be diluted by its constriction, as the government would have it, to a narrow term of art. We are not bound in this context by a definition crafted by an administrative agency and contained in a mere policy directive. Thus, the government's argument that all it must do is remove any domestic barriers to Abreu Garcia's return is not well taken in light of the Supreme Court's command that the government facilitate Abreu Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador. From there, it goes on and it lays out some more of the philosophy, and it points out that I see what you're doing and I don't like it, kid. You better cut this out or there's going to be consequences. There's nothing more clear than that. The government must release from custody in El Salvador Abreu Garcia and return him so that he can have his day, because we don't know. Why don't we know? Because due process wasn't carried out. And I suspect the man is innocent, and I very much hope that whatever is the case is that we all have our day in court, and that nobody gets whisked away in vans, and that everybody hears this and everybody sees it,